Grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life features stories to inspire and motivate you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Visit cyacyl.com.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. We all want to maintain optimum weight, have energy and vitality, and live disease-free. Studies prove that the food we eat can help us conquer weight issues and eliminate many health problems. Even with this knowledge, many of us fall short of our goals. There's a block somewhere between what we know and what we actually do. Fad diets and get healthy quick products promise us the world, and sometimes they deliver for a brief period, but then we're back to where we started. And in the process, we often wreak havoc on our physical and emotional well-being. So what's the answer? Dr. Neal Barnard, a clinical researcher, author, and health advocate, is here today to explain how we can get food to work for us. Dr. Barnard is an adjunct professor at George Washington University and founder and president of the nonprofit Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He's conducted studies investigating the effects of diet on health. Dr. Barnard is the author of several books, including 21-Day Weight Loss Kickstart and Dr. Neal Barnard's Program for Reversing Diabetes. He's a regular guest on network talk and news shows, including The Today Show, Good Morning America, Ellen, and PBS. Welcome, Dr. Barnard. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, it's great to be with you, Joan.
You know, Doctor, I'm very happy that you're here today because you're going to help us kickstart our health and hopefully learn how to make food our friend. I know so many people, like myself, we tend to think of food as the enemy. You know, we have to stop eating this, and if we eat this will happen. So hopefully in this brief period of time, you're going to give us some facts that we can take and incorporate into our lives immediately.
Well, that's really important. And what you said at the beginning, I think, was so central, that people are trying to get healthier. They may want to lose some pounds or get their cholesterol down, and there are so many fad diets out there that have been a bit confusing. So it's important to get things back on track.
Yeah, you know, I think most of us have somewhat of a general understanding of what we need to do, but I'm not sure if we really understand how much power we have over our own physical well-being. And just by making some simple changes, we can dramatically increase our overall physical health and emotional well-being.
And we do have to unlearn a few things. There have been a lot of books and things like that saying you should avoid carbohydrates. And so they'll say, don't eat potatoes and don't eat bread and don't eat noodles and don't eat beans and don't eat rice. And yet if you look around the world, you see that you don't really have to punish yourself quite that way. The thinnest people on the planet live in Japan and rural China, and they're eating rice every day. And in fact, they don't start gaining weight until American fast food comes in and pushes all the rice out of the way and pushes the burgers and so forth in their place. And so some years ago, we actually decided to engage in a number of research studies to put different diets to the test and to see how we could help people lose weight the most, how we could help them to keep it off, and how we could improve diabetes and other conditions. And I'm hoping that we can talk about those.
And you know, I think what you're saying, we're so conditioned to think it's all about calories. And you know, it doesn't work that way because I know from myself that there are times where I'll have a day where maybe I'll just have a sandwich all day. And I'll think, well, gee, I only had about 500 calories. Why am I not losing weight? So it isn't about calories. It's more like you've said about what it is that you're actually eating.
Yeah, it's the type of food that really matters the most. One of our first studies was to help people to knock off some weight. Everybody in the study was a woman after the age of menopause, and they really felt stuck with extra weight. We brought in 64 women. We asked half of them to follow what you might think of as sort of a sensible diet, chicken and fish and that kind of thing. But the other group, we decided to sort of model our diet off of the people who are really the healthiest, longest living people. So we threw out all of the animal products and the meats and so forth, but emphasized vegetables and fruits and beans and whole grains. So breakfast might be a big bowl of oatmeal with cinnamon and raisins and blueberries, and lunch might be maybe a big bowl of bean chili, not the greasy, meaty chili, but we weren't really worrying about calories. And for dinner, if you had a plate of spaghetti, we would say instead of meat sauce, have tomato sauce with wild mushrooms and artichoke hearts. So we weren't counting calories, and we were not restricting carbohydrates, but we were focusing on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans. And over time, we saw something remarkable. that even though these women on this special diet were not limiting calories and they weren't changing their exercise patterns, they started to lose weight. The excess weight started to just melt away. And people who had sort of high blood sugar, not to the point of diabetes, but slightly elevated, their blood sugars came down. And we were struck by the fact that two things seemed to be happening. One is the high fiber content of these foods filled them up. So they got satisfied sooner, and they pushed away from the table without overdoing it. But the second thing was it seemed to improve their metabolism, to get them burning calories more like they used to when they were 15 and 16 years of age. And so the foods got their bodies back on track and helped them to lose weight.
So more of a plant-based diet, eating more plant-based products and eliminating more of the animal-based products. And what are we talking about? I know we think of meats automatically, but what other products are the animal-type products that we should be limiting in our diet?
Well, the meat group includes beef, chicken, fish, all of them. And for this study, we took them all out. But there are good substitutes for everything. The dairy products were gone, so if you wanted to splash milk on your cereal, it would be soy milk or almond milk or rice milk or something like that. And we took the eggs out, too. But although that sounds like kind of a drastic change, our people really enjoyed it because for the first time in their life, it was a menu plan that did not require them to limit portions. And we followed up with another study with people who had diabetes. And even though they were not counting calories, they lost weight too. Their diabetes improved dramatically, and we believe that this approach, which focuses on 4 groups, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and the bean group or legumes, that is probably the most powerful program ever devised for people who either want to keep weight off long-term or want to get diabetes or other health conditions better.
Doctor, what other type of health conditions would a diet like this impact?
You know, it's not just weight. And it's not just diabetes. Back 20 years ago, Dr. Dean Ornish in San Francisco, California, did a wonderful study where he brought in people who had heart disease. Their arteries were blocked, and some of them had already had heart attacks. And he asked them to follow a plant-based diet, very much like what I just described. And he asked them to also make sure they were not smoking, be physically active, and to get a little time to rest every day. So whether that was meditation or breathing or stretching or something like that. So those are the 4 parts of the program. But after a year, the results were really remarkable. The average person was 22 pounds lighter. Their cholesterols were dramatically lower. And when they looked inside their arteries, they were actually starting to open up again. It was almost as if they'd had surgery, but they didn't. It was just the diet and healthy lifestyle reopening those blocked arteries. So we now think that if you make the right kind of diet changes, it can be almost as powerful as medicines or other medical treatments.
So that's a very important point because I really want to drive that home because as I said in the beginning, we have this power and it's really not that difficult.
It's not that difficult. Now, I do have to say, I do encourage people to make big changes, though. I don't encourage people just to switch from beef to chicken or something like that because it's not enough of a difference. But on the other hand, if it sounds daunting to set the meat aside, what we do is we say, well, let's try it for 3 weeks. Oh, well, I can do that for 3 weeks. Let's see how I do. And we really structure it, and we make sure that nobody ever goes hungry. You can eat as much as you want. If you and I went to an Italian restaurant, a person might start out with a glass of wine if they want and have a little salad or a bowl of minestrone or lentil soup or pasta fagioli. And then they could have their spaghetti, which could be, as I said, topped with all the veggies and a nice rich tomato sauce. And you could have an espresso afterwards if you wanted to. And it's not punishment at all. But we are making big changes in that we're setting aside the animal products. We're also keeping oils low. I encourage people not to slather oil all over all their foods. When you do that, you're getting a really healthy menu, and that helps the body to heal.
Even olive oil?
I'm not suggesting that you need to blot your noodles if there's a little bit of a trace here or there. But yeah, I encourage people to learn how to cook using non-oil techniques. For example, let's say I've got a recipe for spaghetti sauce. And the recipes often start out saying, take my onions and garlic and saute them in oil. And by the time the sauce is made, it's often pretty greasy. And I've discovered that you can saute in water, in wine, in vegetable broth, or even in a dry pan. And it makes the sauces and foods you eat lighter. And that's a plus.
Doctor, we spoke about the impact of eating a plant-based diet on diabetes, blood sugar, heart disease. What about other types of conditions such as cancer or arthritis? And I've even heard you talk about Alzheimer's. So what is the impact on those types of conditions?
You know, this is really so important. There is quite an abundant literature right now from scientific journals showing that foods can have two major effects on cancer. The first is they can cut the risk that you'll ever have it. The second is that if a person has had cancer in the past, a healthy diet can keep it from returning. And with regard to breast cancer, which is so common, maybe 30 years ago, it was pretty clear that people who ate fattier foods tended to have more risk. But pretty soon, that seemed to not be a very satisfactory explanation because it wasn't just fat. It was more than that. It was sort of a whole dietary pattern of diet loaded with meat and dairy products that caused people to gain weight. Alcohol played a role. But when people follow a healthy diet, loaded with vegetables and whole grains and beans and so forth, their likelihood of developing cancer drops. But just as importantly, when people have had cancer in the past, the likelihood of it coming back is lower on a healthy diet. For men with prostate cancer, we have links with milk drinking, which really were very surprising. Milk drinking men have more prostate cancer than other men. It really makes a good case for getting away from that. With regard to arthritis, we've been studying this for some time, and we find that when people get away from certain foods, it can be not just the milk and the meat products, but once in a while people react to other things. Some people might react to nightshade vegetables like tomatoes. We track down what is the food trigger for the pain, get that away, and it's amazing to see the pain just melt away, but in many people, that's exactly what happens.
And like you're saying, if you're experiencing some of these conditions like arthritis or heart disease, by just making some dietary changes and giving it a try for, as you say, 21 days, it may give you the opportunity to not have to take that little blue pill.
Yeah, you said it exactly right. Cardiologists learned this maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago. A man would come in and he would say, there's something wrong with my nature, is the way they would put it. What he meant was he was having problems with impotence. Mm-hmm. But we've known for a long time that if a man is having trouble with sexual performance, it's typically not performance anxiety. What it is a lack of blood flow. His private parts are just not getting circulation. And if that's the case, that's probably true for his heart also. Could be even true for his brain. So we want to make diet changes. And in the middle of our diabetes study, we were using this plant-based diet to help people improve their weight and improve their diabetes. And one of our participants, at about 5 months into the study, came in to tell me that his erectile dysfunction had totally resolved. And I'll tell you, that made a believer out of him. All of these things can get better.
I mean, at least I would think it's worth a try.
Well, it's definitely worth a try. Now don't fire your doctor. I encourage people, if you're on medicines and whatever, talk to your doctor and say, I want to try this approach. And then I break it into steps. The first step is you don't change your diet right away. What I encourage people to do is first try to sort out which foods you actually would like. What is, say, a vegetarian breakfast that you could have that you would actually enjoy? So earlier I mentioned maybe a big bowl of oatmeal with cinnamon, raisins, blueberries. How about maybe blueberry pancakes or waffles or something? There are many different, a breakfast burrito. Just take either my book or there are many other books or our website, PCRM.org. You'll find recipes. Try and see which ones you like. If it's lunchtime and you're going to the taco restaurant, try the bean burrito without the cheese. That happens to be vegetarian, and you can fill it full of jalapenos if you want to. That's okay. If you're at the submarine sandwich place, have it without the cheese and meat. Have it with lettuce and tomato and cucumbers and spinach and olives, and drizzle it with a little red wine vinegar and have them toasted. Make it good. So step one is just see what you actually like, what would work for you. And once you've found that, then step two is to do the 3-week, what I call a Kickstart. And that's where for 3 weeks I'm going to do all plant-based. You could say vegan, no animal products at all, but it's only for 3 weeks. And at the end of that time, people experience two things. One is they're healthier. They're losing weight, their energy is better, their blood sugar is better, their cholesterol is coming down, their blood pressure is better. But the other thing is that your tastes have changed. You wouldn't have thought that you would really like these foods that much at first, but people start to really enjoy it, and they don't want to go back to the greasy foods that got them into trouble in the first place.
Dr. Barnard, we need to take a break for this week's Good Life Tips. Stay with us for information to help you make the positive lifestyle changes that we talk about on this show. Welcome back to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman, and our guest today is author, researcher, and health advocate, Dr. Neal Barnard. Dr. Barnard, a while back, Dr. Mark Hyman was a guest on the show, and we spoke about the fact that we're raising a generation of kids to live sicker and die younger. And when I was doing some research in preparation of this interview, I saw some alarming statistics that came from you. 1 in 3 children born in the year 2000 will develop diabetes. 1 in 5 kids have an abnormal cholesterol level and the beginnings of heart disease before they even graduate high school. So what is it that we're doing to our children? What do we need to do to change these numbers, these statistics?
Well, the numbers you gave are correct, and they are frightening. And if things don't change, we are going to have not only a tremendous financial burden in paying for all the medical bills that these kids who grow up to be unhealthy adults are going to have, but we're also going to have a tremendous personal cost to it, where families are going to be torn up by illness. And the fact is, we haven't really noticed, but from year to year, our diets have gotten worse and worse and worse. And the reason I say that is back in 1909, the Department of Agriculture started tracking how people eat in America. At that time, the average American ate 123.9 pounds of meat. Now, let's call it 124. Well, 124 pounds of meat per person per year, that's quite a lot. But by around the year 2000, roughly a century later, we were up over 200 pounds per person per year. That's how much meat we were eating. In other words, your average person was tucking away 75 pounds more meat every single year. Secondly, cheese. Well, we all know that cheese is very fatty. Maybe that's why people like it so much. It's about 70% fat. Well, back a century ago, your average American didn't even eat 4 pounds in a year. Well, today it's about 34 pounds per person per year. Sugar is up. And when I say sugar, I'm including high fructose corn syrup in that. And so we're just in uncharted territory in how we're eating. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is in some ways we've peaked a little bit. Meat intake peaked in about 2004, and it started to come down. We've dropped about maybe 5 or 6% since that time. And more kids are learning about vegetarian and vegan choices. More of them are skipping the greasy cheeseburger and having the veggie burger instead. Those are good choices, and if that accelerates, I think we can beat this problem.
What do we do as parents? I have 2 boys, 17 and 20. If I went up to either one of them and said, I'm going to give you a veggie burger, I think they would laugh at me. I did try switching to whole wheat pasta one time that they picked up within 5 minutes. So what does someone like me do to make these changes that are going to benefit them? And my boys have pretty good diets. They're athletes and they eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, but they still like their steak and burgers. So what can we do?
Well, I think it starts at home. When kids are adolescents, let's face it, they're immortal. They're going to live forever. And they'll take all kinds of risks, not thinking that anything can harm them. And if a bad diet is the worst they're doing, you might be doing pretty well, actually, because kids, when they're away from their parents, they'll light up cigarettes, they'll do all kinds of terrible things. But what you can control is what you do at home. So almost all parents will say, we're not going to smoke in the house at all. Don't let me I don't want to see that here. And then you hope that translates into what kids either will do when they're not at home or what they do when they grow up. And you can also decide as a family that we've learned something we didn't know before. A generation ago, we learned we had to quit smoking. And that's when parents were realizing they had to be the leaders and the models. And then they learned that was helpful to their kids. Well, this generation now is dealing with diet. And that really means the meat and the cheese and the greasy foods. So I would encourage every parent to tackle first their own weight and health problems, to adopt a healthy plant-based diet, and to say that's the way we're going to eat in the home. Now, it does mean that you want to prepare foods that our kids will like, and some kids are phobic of spinach or broccoli or whatever, but there are plenty of good choices. If you're going to serve hot dogs, don't serve a meat hot dog, serve a veggie dog. Kids will like these things, and often these habits will then help the children to get on a healthier path. And the earlier you start, the better. We now know that kids who are raised on plant-based diets are the smartest, healthiest kids, the least likely to fall into obesity. It's a real gift for your kids.
And if we start when they're young, they won't be facing these types of changes that we need to make now.
Exactly. In fact, I see a lot of kids who go vegetarian first before their parents, and they kind of influence their parents and help their parents along, and that helps everybody. But the schools are really not as helpful as they need to be. Schools have restricted budgets. They very often don't bring as many options as kids are going to need, and so they're also used as dumping grounds. If cheese prices fall in the market, well, the government buys up a lot of cheese, and suddenly kids are eating cheese pizza, cheese burgers. They're getting all that grease in their diet, and they end up gaining weight. I think that's a big part of the problem that we have to tackle as well.
Doctor, where can our listeners go to get more information about you and your work?
Well, our website is PCRM.org. That stands for Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM.org. Our Kickstart program is there. We also have live events where people can come and learn everything they need to know about eating in a healthy way and in a very quick time frame. So I hope people will join us.
So that's PCRM.org. Or as always, our listeners can visit our website, which is cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows as podcasts, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, take part in our book club, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Doctor, in about 30 seconds or less, what would be one thing that you want our listeners to take away from this interview?
What a healthy diet really means. It's the 4 food groups to build in every day are vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans. Make them part of your routine. You'll get plenty of protein, plenty of calcium. You do need a source of vitamin B12, which you'll find in supplements and multiple vitamins and any kind of fortified food. But if you include that in your routine, you can remake your body.
Doctor, thank you so much for being here to help us kickstart our health. And if our listeners would also like more information, you can get Dr. Barnard's book, 21-Day Weight Loss Kickstart. Again, thanks so much for being here, and I hope you can come back and spend more time with us.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Joan.
This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.